Hi guys, welcome to lecture of dependency properties in WPF from .NETSkoool. Now, dependency properties in WPF is one of the most important topics of WPF, and also if you are attending an interview, this will be the third or fourth question after all the basic questions that what do you mean by dependency properties. If you are a WPF developer or you aspire to become a WPF developer, you need to know what are dependency properties in WPF, because WPF internally uses a lot of dependency properties. So it is not important that you should know how to make a custom dependency properties, but at least you should understand that WPF uses dependency properties internally a lot. So in this lecture, I will explain you the concept of dependency properties and how WPF uses dependency properties internally or behind the scenes. Now I have divided the lecture in two parts. In this part, we will understand what is a dependency property and how WPF uses it. And in the next lecture, we will understand how to make a custom dependency properties, or what is the basic use of dependency properties if you are making a custom control. Okay, so let's jump into our slides. So dependency properties are the basis for a number of key WPF features, including animation, data binding, and styles. Now you should understand that whatever is happening behind the scenes in WPF, say suppose it is styling or it is animation or it is data binding, which is the most important part of WPF, this happens with the help of dependency properties. So if you do not have a dependency properties, so you cannot achieve animations, data binding, styles within WPF. So you can understand dependency properties like this. Now in C# language, there are normal properties with get and set. Now if you add some extra WPF features such as styling, animation, etc. to those normal properties, then it is called as dependency properties. Or you can say dependency properties are just like normal CLR properties hooked with extra infrastructure or WPF features. Also, dependency properties are used in conjunction with normal CLR properties. So in order to access a dependency properties, you will need normal CLR properties. Let's jump to Visual Studio and quickly see what do I mean by these 3 points. So here is a empty WPF application which does not have anything. It just has a window and a grid. And let's go to the code behind of this WPF application. And let me make a property. You can see this property, my property, is the normal CLR property. Okay, and this wraps this variable myVar inside it. That's because this variable is the private variable. So in order to access this variable, how can you access it? You can access it with my property. So you can say that to access a variable, it is wrapped inside a property. Okay, so this is a point. Same concept goes with dependency properties. So say suppose if I have a dependency property inside it. Okay, so this dependency property will be wrapped inside the normal property. Now this snippet is just for you to understand this concept. This is not a standard snippet that you need to define a dependency property like this. The declaration of dependency property is done in a very different manner. It is just for you for your understanding that I am using this snippet. So you can say that dependency property is wrapped inside a normal CLR property, and it is accessed in the same way as normal CLR property accesses a variable. So let's move back. So you can see the third point, dependency properties are used in conjunction with normal CLR properties. Now let's see the last point. As private variables are accessed by normal properties, same concept is applied with dependency properties which are accessed by normal CLR properties, and this we have seen. So let's move forward. Now WPF vastly uses dependency properties internally. For example, buttons background property is backed by a dependency property called background property. So let's move to Visual Studio and let's see what do I mean by this point. So let's move to Visual Studio and let me delete this. I hope you understood this concept, and let me move to XAML file of my application. and let me have a button inside this XAML. Okay, and let me give some height and width so that my button is visible to you. So let's say height is 60, width is 160. Okay, and let me give a content to this button. Click me, and let me give a background to this button. Say background is equals teal. Okay, so the moment I do this, my button has become teal. Now you can see that this property background of button class is actually a normal property. Okay, but this normal property is backed by a dependency property called as background property. So let me show you this property. So let me go to my code behind file and go to button class, and let's go to definition of this button class. Okay, now button class derives from button base class. Okay, and this button base class in turn derive from content control class, because button is a content control. That means a button has a content in it. The click me, which I defined earlier, was the content of the button. And then let's go to the control part of the button class. So this button eventually derives from the control class. Okay, and you can see there is a dependency property called as background property here. Okay, and this background property is backed by this normal CLR background property. So this background property is visible here, but how you are setting this color teal in XAML with the help of this background property, which is called as dependency property. Okay, you can see this background property is the dependency property. And similarly, there are many dependency properties which are defined in here in the control class. So let's go to XAML. So if you say there is a foreground or say font weight, so this font weight is also a dependency property, or you can say a font weight is also a normal CLR property, but it is being held by font weight dependency property. Let me search it for you, and you can see this is the font weight dependency property. Okay, and this is the normal CLR property which is backing that font weight dependency property. Let's move back to our slides. So I hope you understood that WPF uses dependency properties internally, and it uses them a lot. Now each property, such as content property of button, or say content property of label, or some list box controls, each controls have some dependency properties, because these dependency properties are only responsible for data binding. Now I will explain data binding in one of my coming lectures. For now, you just need to understand that if you need to do data binding, animation, styling, etc., you need these controls to have dependency properties. So you can see the next 3 points which are very important regarding your interviews. The convention of dependency properties name is that it always ends with property. Okay, so let's go to my dependency property. You can see all the properties which are dependency properties are ending with the name property. You can say foreground property, alignment property. So this is the standard convention, that if you are defining a dependency properties, your name should be ending with property. Okay, and you can also see that dependency properties are always declared static and read only. So if you are declaring a dependency properties, it should always be static and read only. Now this is also a very important interview questions, that why dependency properties are always static and read only. So let me go back to our slides, and you can see dependency properties are always declared as static and read only. The reason being, it should always be available to all the controls, hence it should be shared, and therefore it should always be static. Now the reason why we declare anything as static, because we want it to be shared in our application. we don't want the object of that class to be created again and again, so therefore we declared it as a static thing. Okay, same concept applies with dependency properties. If you are declaring a dependency property, so let me show you. So if this background is, let me remove this. If background is a dependency property, so I don't need to create the object of this button class each and every time I need to access this background property, right? It should be made available to all the controls all the time. So that's the reason why dependency property should always be static. Okay, and it should always be read only, because its value should not be changed after initialization. Now once we declare a dependency properties, its value should not be changed. Okay, that's the reason it's always declared as static and read only. Now I have also a window forms application running in my system, so let's check that and check if the button of window forms has a dependency property or not. So let's move there, and you can see I have opened the button class of window form. Okay, and you can see all the properties are normal CLR properties. Okay, that is, these are all automatic properties, so the variables are provided by compiler and those are backed by these properties. Whereas in WPF control, all the properties are backed by these dependency properties, so we don't have any dependency properties in WinForms. Okay, and this is the reason why WPF is much superior than WinForms. So if anyone asks you that what do you mean by dependency properties, your answer should be dependency properties are the property system which are specifically made for WPF and Silverlight applications. And with the help of dependency properties, you can achieve data binding, animation, styles, validations, callbacks, etc. Let's move back to our slides. Now dependency properties are used vastly in WPF, and one of the major use is capability of dependency properties to provide chain notification, which helps in data binding, animation, etc. Now this is also a very important point, and the chain notification functionality is the major constituent of dependency properties, which enables itself to take part in data binding and animation, stylings, triggers, etc. Let me show you an example of triggers and make you explain what do I mean by this. So let's go to my XAML file and let me remove this background color from here so that my trigger works properly, and let me create a trigger. Now I have explained you about triggers in one of my earlier videos, so if you're new to it, the concept of triggers, please watch that video and understand the concept. So let me paste a pre-typed implementation of trigger. So all I'm doing is I am creating a style and I am giving the target type as button, and then I am creating a trigger within that style, and the property of that trigger is mouse over. So when I will hover the mouse over the button, this trigger will fire and the font weight will get extra bold, so this click me content will become the extra bold, and its foreground color, that is the click me color, will be becoming red. So let's try to run this. You can see it's working as expected. Okay, so behind the scenes what WPF is doing is it's using dependency property. So when I hover the mouse over the button, it foreground becomes bold and it becomes red. That is, the is mouse over property becomes true. Okay, and when I remove the mouse from here, this property becomes false. So how WPF is sensing that I am removing the mouse from the button? With the help of dependency properties. So this is mouse over property is the dependency property which provides the chain notification to WPF. So the value becomes true in here and value becomes false in here. Okay, so these true and false values are propagated to WPF system with the help of dependency properties. So if you're using styles or using triggers or you are using animations, all of these things uses dependency properties internally. So I hope this example is clear to you. So let's move back to our slides, and you can see the convention of declaring a custom dependency properties is shown below. So in this lecture I am just explaining you the how WPF uses dependency properties internally. I will be explaining you how to make a custom dependency property in my next lecture, but before that we need to understand what is the convention of declaring a dependency property or a custom dependency property. So let's rather move to Visual Studio and make a custom dependency property, or just explain you the concept of declaring a dependency property. So for declaration you just need to type prof dp and press tab twice. So this will create a custom dependency property for you. Okay, the reason I'm taking the shortcut approach is because this syntax is rather difficult to remember, and this is the dependency property which is defined in here, and this is the CLR property which wraps around this dependency property. So let's make the name of this as custom dependency property. Okay, so this is the custom dependency property, and this is the owner of or you can say the wrapper of that custom dependency property. This is the normal CLR property. So you can say this is CLR property and this is the dependency property. So in order to declare a dependency property, it should be always static, it should be always read only, then it should have a class name of dependency property, and then you need to declare the name of your dependency property, and the name should always end with property. Okay, and then you need to register that dependency property, and in order to do so you use the registered method of dependency property class. Okay, so I should remove this because it's taking in here. So by registering you need to first provide the name of the property wrapper. So this is the property wrapper, my property, so it is given in here, and then we need to specify the type of this property wrapper. So my type is integer, that is my property is of integer type, it returns integer. So you provide integer, and then you need to give the owner of the class in which this dependency property resides. So which is the owner of our class? This is main window. We have defined it in on main window. So let me give it main window, and you can see our error has gone. And then you need to provide the property metadata for this property. So if you are defining some animation or some styling, you need to provide the property metadata. So this property metadata thing I will explain you when we will make a custom dependency property in my next lecture. Okay, so let's move back to our slides. So this is the convention, the picture of that convention which I have pasted in this slide for you to understand. So guys, thank you for so much for listening. I hope you understood the basics of dependency properties. Now you might be in a very good position to answer a few questions on dependency properties. If any interviewer asks you that what do you mean by dependency property, remember the first and foremost important point is that dependency properties are the properties which take part in data binding, animation, styling, etc. in WPF. Okay, and dependency properties are special type of properties which provide change notifications. So these 2 points are very important for you to start your answer. So thank you so much for listening, and in my next lecture I will explain you how to make a custom dependency property and what is the use of custom dependency property. Thank you so very much.